Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 29 for Thursday, September 25th. My name's Farbod Merkazi, and I've been waiting to say this for a couple weeks now. He is Jace Hatfield. That's right, the band is back together. If copyright didn't limit us, I would be playing like the Boys Are Back in Town song. But the moral of the story is we're both here. Jace is back from the trip. I had my own adventures, and we're both finally back. We got a massive week to discuss. It's not only that I'm excited that Jace is here, we have the biggest college football weekend of the season so far, and maybe of the entire season lined up to talk about. You guys know what games we're going to be talking about. We know what games we're going to be talking about. Jace, first of all, welcome back, sir. How are we doing?
It feels like it's been forever since we've both been on together. I feel like I'm starting fresh again. I'm doing great. I'm in recovery mode from a fun bachelor party. Got my tea.
Yeah.
There it is. Got my tea with me.
He realistically is fully recovering. Realistically, it hasn't been that long, but for us, as we've gotten in such a habit of doing this twice a week, every week, and then even before that, at least once a week, it was like, oh wow, it's been a while since we've had the tandem, and you only really start noticing it when you don't have someone to be your foil or someone to tell you you're wrong or right. When you're doing the solo shows, it's all on you. But none of that matters. Well, welcome back, Jace. I think you would be very happy if I asked our viewers to like, comment, subscribe, do all the fun things socially. Make sure you're following us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion. I almost said something terrible there. On Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, at Flag for Discussion. We're on TikTok at Flag, the number 4 Discussion, and on Twitter at F Discussion. We are back as a tandem. Let's talk about our picks, though. Jace, why don't you kick us off? Give the listeners a recap of our picks thus far of the season.
Finally floating above 500. So I'm at 13-12 now. I was at 10-10 coming into last week. You're still killing it at 15-10, still going strong. You were 13-7 coming into last week. I went 3-2. You went 2-3. So a little bit of a switch there for us. Shot in the bark wise, you're at 3 points. USF hit you with that big win against Florida, team that's really struggling at the moment. And I'm at 5 points. I had a cover from Toledo, a cover from UAB, and then I had an outright win from Stanford when they had that home game a few weeks ago. Neither of us hit last week, though. Purdue didn't clutch up for us, and Tulane did not clutch up for us. Tulane actually, we'll talk more about the Tulane-Ole Miss game, but Tulane did not look good, or Ole Miss defense, so they're looking better. We'll break that one down a little bit. And then our parlays, we've done 4 of them. We did not do the week 0 parlay. So we've done 4 parlays. We hit week 3. We did not hit weeks 1, 2, and then this past week, week 4. And we're 11-16 on legs. So pretty solid on our legs. Each of the misses have been 1 or 2 legs. And yeah, week 3 was our big one that set us up we're playing with house money for the rest of the year now. And I feel good about our one that we put together for this week.
You know, me going 2-3 last week was nothing short of a miracle. I was dangerously close. I was staring down the barrel of going 0-5, and you were staring down the barrel of going 4-1 because we both had Oklahoma, but then everything else I think was different. But hey, that's why there's a week 4 or 5. That's why there's the next week to talk about. Speaking of, let's go to Happy Valley. Let's talk about the big game, the one that is closest to you and I's heart. Yes. So I was going to say, I'm going to challenge us not to be a little biased here, because as everyone who's listened so far knows where our allegiances lie outside of just college football in general. But Happy Valley, Penn State, number 6, Oregon goes to Penn State, number 3. Penn State's a 3.5-point favorite. It's the whiteout game. It's the biggest game. It's 7:30 Eastern on NBC. There's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot to discuss. Honestly, I think this game, we've seen a lot of really good breakdowns from fans on both sides, from neutral parties. And it's been kind of like the more cordial, like obviously there are some fans on both sides that are setting a bad example for each fan base. But in general, like you've seen good discussion on social media with each other. Pretty excited for this game. For me, before I hand it off to you, I think all the pressure in the world lies with James Franklin in Penn State. Where are we with this game for you? Obviously, we'll get into all of our leans, all of the weaknesses, but what's your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Penn State is with more pressure going to this game because it's a home game. It's a whiteout. They've hyped that up. And also, we've got a note here. James Franklin has really struggled against, we'll say AP top 6 because that's what Oregon is here. He's 2-17 against AP top 6 teams. They've won 6 straight whiteouts. I think both of those things go hand in hand. Try to win a 7th straight. Also, you need to flip that record around. James Franklin has struggled mightily in games like this. And on the flip side, Oregon, I think, has a lot less pressure. They have an easier schedule. They don't play Ohio State this year. They still have some tough teams on there, no doubt. But this is kind of their circled game. But if you're Oregon, this is a game you can lose. You go into Happy Valley, you lose a close one on a night game, college game day. You can survive that. You can definitely make the playoff with that being your only loss and still be a national championship contender. I think there's a lot less questions that get asked about Dan Lanning and the Ducks in a loss versus questions that would be asked about James Franklin and Penn State in a loss for them. I feel, we've talked about this, I feel oddly calm. I don't know if I want to say confident, but calm about this game. And I think a big part of that is just the new era of college football, knowing you don't have to go 12-0 to make a championship, or to make, BCS era, or even just 11-1, 12-0 with the signature wins to make a 4-team playoff. I think in the 12-team world, there's just a lot less nerves that go into it, which it's made the game seem not quite as big as other big games in the past, if that makes sense. But it also, it feels big anyways. It's not like it doesn't anymore. But I did notice myself feeling way more calm at this time by Wednesday night than I normally would for an Oregon game.
I think for me, it's just to set the table. Penn State brought back, they took the Michigan route. They took the Ohio State route last year, Michigan route 2 years ago, using a lot of their NIL resources to bring back a lot of their juniors to become seniors. So Penn State, largely, other than Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter, is a very similar team to last year. We went into this year, I said it multiple times, this is James Franklin's ceiling definer season. If not now, when? So Penn State went into the season not only bringing back all that talent, they hired Jim Knowles to become the highest paid defensive coordinator in all of college football. I think he's making over $3 million. They had the bye last week. They are at home for their biggest game of the year with their whiteout. And Oregon's the new team. Oregon's the young team. Oregon is the inexperienced team. Oregon is coming not off a bye. They had a game last week. And Oregon is also traveling cross country to play in this game. Everything that you could say that, even take Penn State and Oregon out of this. If we were talking about this game as neutral parties, and these were all the situations, you'd be like, man, that team might be better, but I like the spot for the home team. There's everything that you could say about Penn State that just they have almost every advantage. And for me, James Franklin, that stat tune 17, I think he's tune 20 overall. I just wanted to put the stat in for what he is at Penn State. Some of the crazier stats, Penn State hasn't beaten a AP top 10 team since 2016. Penn State
in the regular season
is in the regular season. Yes, that's huge. Obviously, they played in the playoffs last year. They beat Boise, they beat SMU, but they didn't play like Ohio State's schedule when they beat Oregon, Tennessee, and Texas to make the national championship game. So even then, I don't want to discount SMU from last year or Boise State from last year or Penn State winning the games because someone has to go win those games, and they did. But at the same time, their path of beating quote unquote ranked teams in the playoff, even then you kind of discount. Penn State's won the last 6 whiteout games. The game they lost before that was 2018 against Ohio State. So going back to everything we've said about James Franklin so far, what is the world of college football? What is the atmosphere in Happy Valley if Penn State walks out of this with a loss and fans are then looking at another potential 10-2 season? The other aspect of it, I understand I'm rambling. Penn State has to win this game, not just for narrative, not just for their season. They have what we think now a really good Indiana team to play soon. And they go on the road against Ohio State. So if you're thinking in the Big Ten, games against the top teams, it's Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, probably in a few years once Michigan's back, Michigan. Well, Penn State has Oregon and Ohio State on that schedule. One of them they get at home. You got to go win that game. So
this is, if you lose the Oregon game, you put yourself, when we were picking the Big Ten championship, I remember we kind of came to this conclusion of it. Kind of the math is what's going to matter, and all Penn State had to do was win one of the two Oregon-Ohio State games. This was definitely the easier one for them. The home game, Oregon's first big road test of the season, Dante Moore's first big road test. I would say of his career, he had one or two at UCLA, but even then, it wasn't like he was a high-profile team. So it was just a much
true
different
freshman
atmosphere, going into it. This is the game I think if you're Penn State, you have to win because you don't want to rely on going to Ohio State and winning that game. And then, like you said, even like an Indiana team, if you go 10-2, but you lose Oregon, Ohio State, you're not playing in the Big Ten championship, barring anything crazy happening to Oregon and Ohio State. And if you go 9-3 and you lose the Indiana game, now you're flirting with not making the playoff. So this is what feels like a must-win game for me for Penn State.
That's exactly how I feel about this. It's must-win for Penn State, and we'll get into the breakdown of the game in general. But I can't imagine Monday morning press conference for James Franklin at Penn State coming off of a 34-24 loss. Because fans and the reporters whose job it is to basically be the branch between the team, the head coach, and the fans, they're all going to be kind of residing in the fact that maybe this is our ceiling. Maybe even though this is the best team roster-wise, arguably, that James Franklin's ever had, maybe 10-2, 9-3 is our ceiling. And that's fine. We can make the playoff, but we're never going to go out and be the dominant 11-1, 12-0 team in the conference. That's reserved for Ohio State and Oregon and eventually Michigan again, probably. So that's the atmosphere. I'm curious your thoughts. Like, say Monday morning, Oregon wins 34-24 on Saturday. What is everyone saying about James Franklin?
I would have to imagine Penn State fans are going to be ready to jump off the bandwagon, probably more out of emotion just from the loss than anything else. The hard part with someone like James Franklin is let's say he loses this game 34-20, like you said. The hard part about James Franklin is his ability. He's a really good recruiter. He gets good players out of the transfer portal, and he dominates bad teams. It's hard to get much better than that. Like, it's hard to find a coach who's going to come in and do anything better than what they've already done. The only thing that James Franklin hasn't done is win the big games consistently enough to go far into a playoff. Obviously, like we said, he beat Boise State and SMU last year, but I don't think anybody's, I think there's a lot of teams in the playoff that could have probably won on that path. So I think if you're James Franklin, if you're a Penn State fan talking about James Franklin, it's going to be so frustrating. And I totally understand being pissed off at him. But you need to ask yourself, is it worth risking being a lot worse than this for the chance to be better? Because your floor is so high at Penn State. You're going to recruit top 10 classes year in, year out.
What you're describing is, although it's a completely different situation and Clemson's won national championships with Dabo, but Clemson is falling into a path of, we're not where we want to be. We're not championship contenders, but we're too good to fire our coach. And
I would argue Clemson's worse than that. Clemson's
now they are
really struggling this year. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think Clemson's now worse than that. I don't know if James Franklin. I feel like Clemson's a little different because Dabo Swinney just refused to adapt. So like you were going to see the fall off from them. Whereas James Franklin's adapting well. Like, I think they're going to stay on a decently like upward trajectory as college football grows. So will they. They're not going to grow exponentially. Like, you're not going to see them turn into like a Michigan who's probably going to come back, or an Oregon or USC who looks like they're kind of on the comeback. You're not going to see them, I don't think, like turn up and really like use this new era of college football to their advantage. But I don't think they're going to fall off because of it. So you got to ask yourself, like, am I comfortable would I rather hope that James Franklin randomly figures out how to win big games, or do I say screw it and I'm willing to risk 7-5 for 2 years if that means we can eventually have a higher ceiling? That's the big question. I feel like as Oregon fans, we've been there before, and I think I hit the point where I was all in on going at getting rid of coaches in the past that I felt like we were at a ceiling with. Because as a fan with national championship hopes, you want a national championship, and I don't care if I'm 8-4 if that means that I can be 12-0 one year, because I'm sick of being 10-2. You know?
Right, and it's also, I think, and I'd love to talk to a Penn State fan about this to confirm, but the general vibe I've gotten is kind of where Oregon was in the 2010s, where like they were the new hot team, but it was still USC and Stanford that were kind of just telling them you're still a little brother to us. And how Penn State feels is like, yeah, we can run through the whole Big Ten except two teams, and it's like we're never going to be even on a given year superior than Ohio State or like whoever's the power of the Big Ten is at that time. I agree with you. It's this is the whole conundrum of do you take the risk? And I don't want to keep going down this rabbit hole of firing James Franklin because they're never going to do that. His team's going to be constantly too good, and he might win this game. Um, it's the rabbit hole that people go down of if we fire our really good coach who's not great, we're also taking at least a 20% chance that the next coach is going to tank the program. And it's like you're taking the chance that it's just not going to work out. Just as high as of a chance that guy is going to elevate your program is the same chance that your program is going to regress under him. It's the same question but this goes back to what we were saying of why Penn State has most of the momentum. Because in my opinion, I think if Dan Lanning loses 34-20, it'd be like, Oregon fans would be downtrodden. They'd be upset. They'd be bummed. But they would also be like, we still got a shot. We can live to fight another day. We have a really good coach. We have a really good infrastructure. We're young. That was Dante Moore's first major road experience. Like we're not out of it. Whereas when you're Penn State and you lose, you're full of seniors. Next year is going to be a completely new team. It could be better, but it's going to be a completely new team. And this is your year to capitalize on that. And if you lose your fans, your fan base, your students, your like everyone around your program is just going to feel maybe this is our ceiling. We're about 20 minutes in. Let's talk about the actual game. There's a fly around me. What do we like about Penn State that could challenge Oregon?
Yeah, I think the Penn State offense, the two sides of the ball, Penn State offense, Oregon defense, I think that's the side of the ball that presents the most opportunity for Penn State in this game. Last year, Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen ran, I don't want to say all over, but pretty comfortably all over the Oregon defense. It's an Oregon defense that lost a lot on the defensive front. They've retooled pretty well from what we've seen so far, but I mean, you lost Derek Harmon, who was a first-round pick, who was in that game, Jordan Birch, but you do have Mateo back. You do have Amari Washington, who looks like Derek Harmon 2.0. But you lose a lot from that team. And if you're Penn State, I think that's your best opportunity to win. Keep the Oregon defense on the sideline and run the ball. I have to imagine Oregon is going to probably game plan focus number one, defend the run in this game. They should. There's more thoughts to be had about Oregon's ability to game plan from their DC, but you would think you assume Oregon's going to go all in on stopping the run in this game. If you're Penn State and you're still able to run the ball, then you present a lot of problems for Oregon, and you're going to have the opportunity to score 30 plus points pretty quickly. If you can't run the football and Oregon is going all in to stop the run and you're struggling, then it becomes the game of, can Drew Allar and the wide receivers outpace the Oregon secondary? I think that's probably what's going to end up being the biggest question mark in this game for the Penn State offense. I think if Penn State's running game is going to get theirs. Like, it's too good of a running game. You have too good of running backs. Allar can run the ball if he needs to as well. They're going to get theirs, but I do think Oregon's going to work hard to stop the run, or at least slow it down, probably not stop it. And that's going to be a give and take all game. Penn State will get theirs. Oregon will get theirs in the run game as well. But can Drew Allar make the big throws? He hasn't thrown for over 250 yards since the USC game that went into OT last year. And that was a game Tyler Warren had like 200 plus receiving yards, and a lot of them were just jump balls in the end zone.
Like 18 catches or something.
Yeah, it was something ridiculous. An interesting note that when I was doing research for this, the Penn State wide receivers, so Trevor Pena, great wide receiver, Kyron Hudson, great wide receiver, Devontae Ross is a very solid wide receiver 3. They're all pretty undersized. You got 6'1", 200 pounds, and then you have 5'11" and 5'11", and just under 200. The Oregon secondary is lengthy this year. In the years prior, it's been a smaller secondary. This year, other than Theron Johnson and Jaden Kennedy, everyone is over 6 feet tall and heavier than 200 pounds. So I think if you're Drew Allar, you're not going to be able to underthrow the football, or that's going to get picked off. You have to hit players in the run. You have to be able to throw your curl routes on good timing. I think there's a little bit of an advantage there for Oregon in the length, and it's going to come down to Drew Allar. Can you make the big throws? How accurate can you be? something that this is a great, I've heard this in the media a few times, but it's, if you ask a Penn State fan, how many games has Drew Allar won you? Not games they won when he was the starting quarterback, but has he actually won you where you said, if it weren't for this man, we would lose that football game? I don't know if there's any. Some people you could say the USC game, but you could also easily say Tyler Warren caught 3 could have been picks for touchdowns. So this might be the game where Drew Allar has to win you.
I completely agree. I think, just to piggyback off of everything you've said, last year, I've seen Penn State fans saying, if we can establish the run, make it easier on Drew Allar, we're going to win this game. And I agree with you. That's probably the best chance. And not that chance, you need like a lot of luck, but we saw these two teams, granted on a neutral site field, play less than 12 months ago. And Penn State put up 297 yards on the ground on Oregon. They took advantage of Oregon's defense rushing the ball. And who won that game? Oregon did. I think the whole argument of Penn State having to establish the run to win the game is false. But at the same time, if they don't establish the run, that feeds right into what Oregon should be trying to do. Just to piggyback off of you, I think if Oregon is not necessarily fully loading the box, but taking a big emphasis against trying to stop the run. And you're not going to stop Katron Allen or Nick Singleton, but if you can slow them down, if you make Drew Allar realize he has to go play hero ball, he has to put on a cape and become Superman, then, like you said, Oregon does have the secondary that they can come back and make things a little difficult on Penn State's receivers, make things difficult on Drew Allar. Not necessarily just turnovers, but batting balls away, making it hard to make catches, limiting explosive plays in general. Drew Allar is 2 for 9 this season on passes of 20 yards or more, like just completion-wise to his receivers. And we're going to say a lot of stats right now, but the argument against the stats I'm about to tell you are, well, Oregon or Penn State haven't played anybody. So how much of the 2 for 9 from Drew Allar, and maybe you can explain this, is they haven't played anybody, but they also haven't opened up the playbook? And how much of the 2 for 9 from Drew Allar is the Penn State passing offense still has some work to do? So if Oregon can slow down the rush game at least a tad and make Drew Allar put on a cape and become Superman, I think you're going to find yourself in a lot more advantageous positions if you're Oregon, to not even turning them over, but taking the ball back, forcing punts, drowning the crowd out. That's a big key for me. I think this is a massive atmosphere. Everyone keeps saying it's one of the hardest atmospheres to play in the country. If Oregon goes into this, goes 3 and out on offense to start, Penn State goes down, they score, let's say even a field goal, and Oregon gets the ball back. They move the ball a little bit, a penalty here, a penalty there. They're letting the crowd affect them. It's going to be hard for the Ducks to pull away. But if Oregon goes in there, stops Penn State, maybe scores here, and then they take control, eventually the crowd will calm down a little bit, and you can play your brand of football.
Yeah, and I think to that point, exactly, Penn State's going to try and go and establish a run. I think both teams are going to go and establish the run right away. You don't want to risk the big turnover in a big game like this. You don't want to risk the early mistake. And I do genuinely believe Penn State doesn't want to find themselves in a game where Drew Allar has to play hero ball for 4 quarters. I don't think that Drew Allar and his wide receivers are the matchup that they want to rely on in this game.
He has 5 passing touchdowns this year.
Yeah, that's...
I'm sorry I interrupted, but that's the question I had for you. Is a lot of Penn State fans have been saying Penn State and Andy Kotelnicki, their offensive coordinator, have been hiding plays or have been holding back. I still think you're going up against Villanova in football. You better throw 3 or 4 in that game.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We saw Oregon play some lackluster opponents so far this year. Dante Moore was just toying with them, throwing 70-yard bomb after 60-yard bomb, 50-yard bomb. I do think Penn State might have an issue throwing the football downfield. 2 for 9 is bad on 20-plus yard throws, no matter who you're playing, especially when it's opponents that you should have time in the pocket against these teams. Your wide receivers should be generating space, and they should be able to go up and get a football over those guys. I really do think that Penn State, early in the game, we're going to see a Penn State offense try to establish the running backs, probably through the screen game. I also think we're going to get a lot of creative runs, a lot of 2-back 2-back sets with Drew Allar. Last year, they did a lot of the runs with Drew Allar where it was like a knife option kind of play where he'd cut right through the middle. That worked really well last year, but it's on tape. It'll be interesting to see how much they copy that because it worked really well a year ago. As you mentioned, it didn't unfortunately end up in a win for them. But I think we're going to see a lot of established running backs and then a lot of quick RPO bubble screens, a lot of quick outs to tight ends. I think we're going to see a lot of that out of Penn State early in the game. Probably a trick play or two to try to get something over the top after lulling the Oregon defense to sleep. I think we're going to, as what I'm trying to say is I think Penn State's going to avoid the Drew Allar hero ball for as long as possible. And it maybe if they establish the run and they get the backs going, they don't even need to play it, and her defense is playing up to the standard that they can play it, they won't need it. And that's the dream if you're Penn State. I think on the flip side, the Oregon offense, Penn State defense is probably the less variable, maybe the more straightforward matchup in this game. Really good offense, really good defense. Not a lot of weaknesses on the Penn State defense. Not a lot of weaknesses on the Oregon State or the Oregon offense. I don't think like either one of these is going to dominate the other one much more than the other. I think Oregon offense is going to get theirs. They're going to score points. They always do. Penn State's a really good defense. I think they're not going to get beat deep much. I think they're going to bend, not break against Oregon. They're going to keep Oregon underneath. And I think they'll hold Oregon to a handful of punts, maybe a turnover or two. But I think that's a little bit more straightforward of a matchup. You've got the biggest question mark on that side of the ball is going to be Oregon's tackles, Isaiah World and Alex Harkey. They're not big question marks. Like when I say the biggest question mark for the game or for Oregon offense, I'm not saying they themselves are bad football players. They're both great, and they've played really well this year. But they're the biggest opportunity if you're Penn State to try and get to Dante Moore quickly, to try and shut down the run game. You have some really good defensive ends and D linemen from Penn State as well. You have Dennis Sutton, who is a former 5-star. He's a senior now, playing good football. You have I almost said Cam Coleman, Jazz Coleman. You have you have Zane Durant. I keep getting Cam Coleman out of my head now. You got Zane Durant as well. That's a really good D line. Oregon's interior offensive line is a little bit stronger than the exterior of it, so I can see a world where Oregon's trying to run through the middle. Dante Moore has not really been under pressure at all this year, so that'll be an interesting thing to handle as well. He hasn't played in a loud environment that's not his own, and he hasn't been under pressure. If you're Penn State and you can get to Dante Moore probably via the tackles of Oregon, how's he going to handle a loud crowd? You get a big second down sack, now he's got 3rd and 12. How's he going to handle that crowd and just getting sacked? That's going to be probably that's where if you're Penn State, you're going to win that side of the ball. It's probably in that fashion.
On the Oregon side of it, they don't have Jordan James from last year, but they have a stable of 7 running backs that they've been using in every game. The last year in the Big Ten title game, Kenyon Sadiq almost had his breakout. He hurdled the dude. He had 2 touchdowns. His first touchdowns of the year last year came, and he had 2 of them in the same game.
First quarter.
And then Decorian Moore, true freshman, going out. I hate to say this, Penn State's starting in number 1 corner has barely been targeted this year. I think so, yeah. Has barely been targeted this year. And a lot of that is by design by opposing offenses, basically saying, we want no part of him. Well, now you really get a fun matchup of Decorian Moore on AJ Harris and see how, like, good on good, see how that plays out. For me, where Oregon's offense worries me is when you're going into an environment like that early on. I care less if like they're scoring and it's a closer game going towards the middle of the game or later in the game. But early on, when they're just getting their butterflies out of the way, when they're just trying to complete some passes, get some yards, catch some first rounds to really be settled into the game. Obviously, Dante Moore matters on how much, like, we think he's poised, but how poised is he in those environments? But 2, with the Alex Harkey, Poncho, Isaiah World, and the Oregon offensive line, we've seen a couple times this year them go into games and them being really good penalty-wise. They went to Northwestern, 0 penalties. They, last week at home against Oregon State, couple penalties, false starts, jumping ahead. If Oregon's offense is moving the ball, but the penalties continue to push them back, then that's where you get worried a little bit of how effective can the offense be if penalties continue stalling drives out. Just a couple quick stats. Oregon this season, and I understand they've only played 4 games and they haven't played a lot of great teams. They haven't given up a single passing touchdown. They're first in the country because of that. They've given up 4 rushing touchdowns, or 46 in the country. Opposing points per game, they're 9th in the country, giving up 9 points per game. Offensively, they're very balanced. 50.8 points per game right now. They've scored 11 touchdowns through the air and 14 on the ground. Compare that with Penn State. Penn State has also played nobody. They're averaging 44 points per game, 5 passing touchdowns though, and 9 rushing touchdowns. The 5 is 70. They're 78th in the country currently through 3 games through the air passing touchdown wise. Opposed, like on the defensive side, they're excellent. This is a very similar, like their counting stats are very similar. Oregon has 7 sacks, Penn State has 9. Oregon has 5 turnovers, Penn State has 7. The other major thing is third down conversion percentage offensively. Oregon is 10th in the country at like converting on third down offensively. Penn State is 76th. So that's another huge way of slowing or quieting down the crowd and getting your offense settled in. If you are gaining yardage on the first down, second down plays to get an easier third down conversion, keep the ball in your hands, quiet down the crowd eventually. There's so many factors that make you want to say Penn State, but then there's a lot of other factors that make you want to say Oregon. I don't know in general. We'll obviously give our picks at the end of the show, but there's so many keys to this game.
Yeah, this feels like a genuine coin flip. And I mean, we're obviously as fans very excited to watch. I'm sure Penn State fans are too. Would be awesome to be a neutral fan just to be able to watch a game like this. And I imagine it's going to come down to one of the final couple possessions of this game. An interesting note, we don't want to go too long on this game, but one last thing I'll say. Coming into this week, you've heard 2 big narratives, one about Oregon, one about Penn State. You already mentioned one of the Penn State ones, which was they've been hiding the playbook. There's a lot that they haven't shown quite yet, and Oregon's about to see what that is. On the flip side, we've heard Oregon take the opposite approach, where they've said Will Stein has put out every formation known to man, every motion known to man. They've gone under center, they've gone pistol, they've gone shotgun, they've gone 2 backs, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, 3 backs, some of them lining up out wide. They've opposite approach. Oregon's kind of, according to the media narrative, Oregon's going to this game with, here's every possible thing you can do on a football field. Try and figure out what we're going to do and see if you can game plan for all of it.
Prepare for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Try to drown
and on
them.
the flip side, Penn State's taking the other mentality of you only have this little bit of film plus the Big Ten championship game from last year. See what you can figure out from that, and then we're going to release a bunch of new stuff that you haven't seen quite yet. It's hard to tell. Granted, these are the kind of narratives you hear in the media a lot, but when you hear from coaches, they could just be saying no because they don't want people to know it. But coaches will always be like, no, we don't think that way. So that's a fun media narrative. It is true though. Like if you go back and look at the Oregon film, they run seriously like every set you can possibly run in football. And if you go to the Penn State film, it's 3 or 4 sets, very similar options between the running backs, lead blockers with the other running backs not getting the ball, screens out of the backfield, quick RPO kind of bubble reads. So it'll be interesting to see if one of those was true or not, and what comes out of that.
Those narratives aren't nuanced at all to me. Look, if you told me the Penn State has been hiding some of their plays, sure, I'll buy that. But at the same time, I think in general, Oregon probably has too, even though they have gone into a lot of different sets and made Penn State have to over prepare for everything. I think when you're looking at it, it's no college football team, no NFL team, no football team. It has their full playbook week 1 to 3. They're still installing based on what their current team can do. It doesn't matter what last year's team can do. I also think if James Franklin and Penn State and Andy Kotelnicki, who's an extremely creative offensive coordinator, he came from Kansas with Jalen Daniels. They did a lot of the read option stuff. I expect that to show up that we haven't seen yet with Drew Allar. But you can't tell me that those entire Penn State coaching staff said, most of our team's back from last year, our coordinators back from last year, the scheme's the same. We're going to hide plays as if there isn't a ton of tape from last season to prepare from. The difference is last year we went into the year saying Penn State doesn't have a lot of difference makers at receiver. They do now. Trevor Pena and Kyron Hudson are really good receivers. That's going to be a pretty big matchup for me in Oregon's young secondary versus their receivers. We don't want to talk overly about this. We'll talk more and more as we go. It's just going to be such a good game, man.
Yeah. This is going to be this is the most hyped up game for Oregon season so far that we know of. This is going to be probably one of the biggest whiteout games we've had in a little while and might have for a little while. It's cliche, it's generic, but it's true. It's going to come down to Dante Moore, Drew Allar, who can make the big plays when teams need it most. I think both teams have decent enough defenses. Both teams have running games that are going to work decently well. One of those quarterbacks are going to have to make a big play or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 if they're going to win this game. Who's it going to be? We'll tell you who we have our money on later in the show. I think I know it's cliche to say it's between which quarterback, but I think this game actually is that.
Real quick, give us like a minute for this. Matchup wise, for this game specifically, not for the future, not for your NFL team, but this game, experience into account, everything. Would you rather have Drew Allar, Dante Moore? Would you rather have Penn State's running game, Oregon's running game?
Penn State's running game.
Would you rather have Oregon's receivers, Penn State's receivers, including tight ends?
Oregon receivers.
Okay. Now defensive line. I mean defense in general.
Counting coordinators or no?
Counting coordinators.
Penn State.
Easy. Yeah, and then offensive line, I think that's more of a toss-up. So it's
offensive lines, they're both really good.
It's a matchup of two really good teams, and as Jay said, we're gonna get into it. And I don't think you saying Dante Moore, I think I could argue Drew Allar. There's a great argument for that. He's been in some of these games before.
Any of the picks I just made fairly.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about. We'll break it down more for once we get to our picks. We got to get to Athens. Number 17, Alabama goes to number 5, Georgia. Georgia's a 3-point favorite Saturday, same time. One of the biggest crimes of this college football weekend. They gave us a really great slate, but they put the two biggest games on at the same time, which is ridiculous because you want to watch both at the same time. You want to listen to both at the same time. Regardless of that, we saw these two teams play last year in Tuscaloosa. Alabama was up 28-0. Georgia at some point had the lead on them. Alabama came back and won the game.
That was like the Ryan Williams breakout, wasn't it? That big touchdown spin move, crazy play you made.
Alabama's had some craziness happen this year already. They obviously lost to Florida State. Georgia's had some craziness. They held on to a massive game against Tennessee, in a game in which they looked really good. And maybe you could say less about the defense, but I could argue that was just Tennessee's offense. Where are you with this game?
Yeah, this is going to be the Tennessee game for Georgia. Kind of felt like the Gunnar Stockton breakout game for me. I have admittedly been somewhat down on Gunnar Stockton. I had really dismissed his arm talent and his ability to throw the deep ball. I feel like most of his career it was a lot of handoffs. I would say most of his career, it's not been a long one. Like it was like in the playoff, we saw a lot of handoffs, a lot of short slants, a lot of RPO bubble reads, things of that nature. Against Tennessee, we still saw that. It's the Georgia offense. It's football. You're going to do those things. He did those things at a really high level, but he also attacked Tennessee downfield with Zachariah Branch, which was really impressive for them to see. That's a speedy wide receiver. Zachariah Branch was a guy in that game who had a couple of screen passes, bubble reads, and then also would burn a defense deep, and Gunnar Stockton was putting out the money for him. David Bell also was impressive in that game. I thought the Georgia wide receivers and weapons stepped up. Gunnar Stockton stepped up, especially in that second half. Once that Georgia offense was moving along, like that late third, fourth quarter, it really felt like Georgia was unstoppable. It'll be interesting to see if they can carry that energy into a home game against Alabama. I think Georgia's going to play good, tough Georgia football, and I have a lot of confidence they're going to score points in this game. My fear for Alabama is this is going to be similar to what we just talked about Dante Moore. It's going to be Ty Simpson's first tried and true big road game where I think going into it, it's that big at the Florida State game, but I don't think they were expecting that to be what it ended up being. So this will be the first Ty Simpson also going to a game nervous, all right, big road game, big atmosphere, night game, all eyes on me kind of thing. Kalen DeBoer also and Ryan Grubb we've seen the classic Ryan Grubb offense against the subpar teams Alabama's played, and Ty Simpson was torching people. We haven't seen it from him in a big game. I kind of hope we get it, because if we get that Georgia momentum offense we saw last week, and we get a tried and true DeBoer Grubb offense, this could be also like a 38 to 35 game. If you don't have two TVs, I'm so sorry, because I have a feeling both these games are going to come down.
So I have two main concerns with Alabama. First of all, Alabama, we've seen them now. Last year, they go on the road to Vanderbilt, they lose. They go on the road to Oklahoma. They don't look, not only do they lose, they don't look like the same team as when they're at home. They wipe the slate clean. They come back fresh year on the road in Tallahassee, lose to Florida State. Florida State could be a really, really good team, and they've done everything to tell us right now that they're elite. They're beating the teams that they should beat by a lot. So Florida State could be a really, really good team. I'll give you that. But it's almost like on the road, Alabama feels like they don't have the motor. They're not getting up for these games. I also think, like, I don't think that's going to be a problem in this game. I think Alabama under Kalen DeBoer has shown for the major games that they'll get up for it. But Oklahoma was down last year. Vanderbilt was Vanderbilt. Alabama didn't get up for those, and they found out. And they probably went into this road game against Florida State thinking they were better. They feel with a bit of an entitlement. They found out. Now, which Alabama are we going to get in this game? Are we going to get a team that's like hungry, ready to go, juice, which I think is going to come out? But that's why it's a concern of it's not guaranteed. It's not something you ever said about Alabama under Saban. That's a knock on DeBoer, obviously. But I feel confident that they're going to come out with their hair on fire and juice and ready to go. The motor is going to be up. But that is a concern. My concern with Georgia lies mostly on the offensive line. Their offensive line in general, not getting a lot of push run game wise, not doing a great job protecting Gunnar Stockton. Both teams have actually given up the same amount of sacks. It says they're 46th in the country, but it's one of those things where like they're tied with like 40 other teams. So like they've given up 4 sacks. So that means less to me right now. But for me, what Georgia is the offensive line issue. The other issue with them is, I can't believe I'm saying this, defensively, it might be Tennessee's offense is really, really good, and it is. But also they gave up a ton of plays, a ton of explosive plays to Tennessee, to Joey Aguilar. And if you're thinking about what is Alabama theoretically going to be good at, it's got to be Ty Simpson and Ryan Williams. And that's how they beat Georgia in the first place last year. They try to take the top off, beating them downfield. And the concern in general there is how quickly does Georgia adjust and mitigate to those issues? Because I expect an Alabama team to come out ready to go.
Yeah, it's a really young Georgia secondary, a really talented one. It's all 4 and 5 stars, but really young. And against that Tennessee game, I can't remember the number. Joey Aguilar started like 17 of 17 or something ridiculous like that. But the Georgia defense really settled into that game. That young secondary did. They're even going to have their hands more full. You have to play Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard. And then Alabama gets Jam Miller back, which I also think helps play that hair on fire mentality. When you get your star running back, I have to imagine he was going to play angry. He's also going to be fresh. If you're Alabama, that can be the spark plug that you need. And that young secondary is going to have their hands full with Ryan Williams, with Jeremy Bernard. And the Jam Miller thing is big because if pre-Jam Miller, Alabama had been struggling to run the football this year, and they really struggled against Florida State. That would have allowed you to play the pass a little bit safer, knowing like, okay, Alabama's run game isn't what it normally is. But now you get Jam Miller back. That young secondary can't just play the pass every play and be late to a run fit and have it be okay because the linebackers ate it up. This is going to be a game where your young secondary is going to have to be quick to run fits, but they're also going to have to be ready to get back against what are going to be NFL wide receivers here in a couple of years. So the Georgia secondary is going to have their hands full. It's young. It's Kirby Smart. They're talented. It's going to be this will be a big boy game for them. This will be the game. Have they grown up? Did the Tennessee game grow them up? Because they really settled in well to that. We'll have to find out. Tennessee also had just some massive plays that you can attribute sometimes to young, like blown coverages, things like that. That can get cleaned up in the film room. At the same time, it's a DeBoer and Grubb offense. There's going to be 4 wide receivers running down your field. revert style. And if you're a secondary and you're not communicating, you're not ready for that, you're going to get wide open Alabama wide receivers. So Georgia's going to have to be careful about that.
So one thing about Jam Miller, I agree that it's going to be a big change and big boost for the team. But we also saw last year, one of our critiques on Alabama in general was their run game was poor. And if you had any critiques on DeBoer's Washington 2022 and 2023 teams, it was that they tried to establish a run game. But they couldn't do it as effectively as they wanted to. Obviously, they made the national title game, lost in that. Whatever happens there, it happens there. But the run game was a point of concern in those seasons too. So if Jam Miller can help them at least establish some sort of run to make life easier on Ty Simpson, mind you, Georgia hasn't lost at home. They have the longest home winning streak in the country. They haven't lost at home since before COVID, I don't think.
My goodness.
It's if Alabama were to come in and win this game, you expect them to be on their P's and Q's everywhere. I guess I have a question with you because, like, Kalen DeBoer after the Florida State game, we've talked about it. He lost to a bad Oklahoma team last year. He lost to Vanderbilt last year. He lost to Florida State this year. But against some of the best coaches in the country, he's done very well. And I guess the question I have for you is there anything to the theory of he knows the weakness better than anybody of the Kirby Smart defense? Because if you remember, even though Dan Lanning might be running a slightly different version of it, Dan Lanning was their defensive coordinator. He took that defense to Oregon, and Kalen DeBoer, when he was at Washington, he was 3-0 against Oregon. Is there any possible truth of it's not necessarily a key to the game, but how well does Kalen DeBoer know how to dice up that defense?
I think it helps. And I imagine DeBoer's watching those Oregon game films to try and figure out what Kirby Smart's going to run. I think that helps. Both Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning love like a 3-4 base, but then they'll run like a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5 or anything kind of ridiculous like that out of it. We're going to see the same thing from Georgia. That's the bread and butter defense that Georgia had in those like national championship years where it looks like they could have beaten NFL teams those years. That's a staple defense that, Kalen DeBoer has seen 3-4 times. I think he's got the wide receivers to beat. Those are the kind of defenses you have to beat with big play wide receivers. He had it at Washington. He's got it here at Alabama. He just needs a quarterback that can deliver the ball confidently. And then I do think to beat a team like Georgia, you do need to have some semblance of a run game if you're going to go into Athens and win. Jam Miller is going to have to be the piece. Grubb and DeBoer aren't, that you mentioned, that's not their bread and butter. That's not what they're best known for. So they're going to have to try and figure something out. And then I think the Georgia offense, Alabama defense is the more straightforward part of this game. But I think you've correctly identified the Alabama offense, Georgia defense is the chess match that's going to determine this game.
Right. I mean, everything we talked about with Drew Allar making him Superman, Georgia's going to try to make Ty Simpson play Superman too. And part of that is Alabama is the ninth ranked passing offense per game nationally. Alabama has 102nd ranked rushing offense nationally. Georgia is lower on passing, but they're much higher on rushing. Georgia's much more of an even based team. They're 41st passing, 30th rushing. Alabama relies so much on the pass, so you could argue that they might not need it as much. But if they don't get a good run game going on the road, just same thing we said, to quiet down that crowd a little bit, keep Georgia off the field, it might be a tough game for Bama. I'm not sure. I still want to see what each quarterback will bring to this game because that means a lot. I think everything that we've said negatively about Bama or negatively about Georgia was down 28-0 against Alabama last year. Georgia was down 21-7 to Tennessee this year. They won the game 44-41. You got to respect the resolve that Kirby Smart and his team come in with. They're never out of the game. They know Joey Aguilar can start out 17-17. They can take a big lead, but guess what? We're Georgia. We can come back. So Georgia's main benefits for them, main advantages in this game are they're home. They got a really good team offensively. Can they keep spreading the ball out? I'm scared a little bit on their offensive line versus Alabama's defensive line. If Alabama can get home, can at least get a young quarterback in Gunnar Stockton, like hurry him up a little bit, put him under pressure. That's when he'll probably put some balls into jeopardy. But it's a tough situation, especially when you're going against Georgia, who's already so good and hasn't lost at home since before COVID.
Yeah. We'll give our picks. I don't want to say too much more without giving our picks. I'm excited. I think, like I said, the Alabama offense, Georgia defense chess match. I hate that it's at the same time as the Oregon Penn State game, but that's the side of the ball I'm really excited to watch. Obviously, that whole game, but that's going to be a very fun thing to unfold. That's DeBoer, Kirby Smart, just perfect, going at what they're best at. That's going to be awesome to watch.
All right, we have one more game to break down, but first we got to get into shot in the bark. But I do want to say one thing. If at the end of the Oregon breakdown I seemed a little distracted, is because my dog just ripped a big fart. So speaking of shot in the bark, that's a great intro to this point. Why don't you break it down? Tell us what the rules are, and let's go for it.
So as always, we're tracking our points all season long. Every underdog that you pick has to be 8.5 points or greater, basically to cover more than a one-score game. You get 1 point if your dog covers, and you get 2 additional points if they win outright. So obviously, if you're picking an underdog and they win outright, they would cover as well, so you get 3 points for that. So Farbode, you are currently at 3 points. Give us your dog of the week.
I'm going to ride with West Virginia plus 12.5 at Utah. Versus Utah. Utah, it was my Big 12 champ pick from the beginning of the season. I still believe that they have it in them. I just saw some pretty disappointing offensive play from Devin Dampier in that offense last week against Texas Tech. I do expect Utah to come out ready to go, ready to roll, and try to beat the snot out of West Virginia. But I also think them being on the road, Sherrod being a good coach, even though he doesn't have the players yet, it's enough for me to say 12.5 could be in play. Here, I'm going for the cover. I don't think this is going to be an outright win, but I'm going for the cover.
I like the cover there. It's always good to pick a team coming off like a tough emotional loss too. Especially Utah teams travel across the country to go play at West Virginia. I feel like that's a good spot for a cover.
Right, and it's
All
also
right.
Utah at their strongest. They want to run the ball. They can be very explosive and put up points quickly. If West Virginia does some bit of a stranglehold on the run game, it can really slow down the game and speed up the clock to keep the points low in general. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Go for your dog.
No, you're good. All right, my shot in the bark this week is going to be the Washington Huskies plus 8.5. So thanks, DraftKings, for keeping them above the 8 line there. And they're playing a home game against Ohio State. Main thought process here, Washington's a tough place to play for anybody, especially a team like Ohio State going across the country for a young quarterback and Julian Sayin. His first real road test. He got Texas at home this year. He didn't look great. Ohio State didn't look great in that game. They've blown out the bad teams they've played. But they struggled. They won, but they just didn't look good in the Texas game. I think it's a tough place to play. It's a tough spot for them. I think Washington's been playing pretty good football this year. They did have that scare against Colorado State, but I think that was more of a wake-up call for this Washington team than anything. Also, there's a reason why casinos are rich. There's a reason why they exist,
Right.
why sports betting exists. It's partially why I hate that every bet and media personnel is picking Oregon, but 97%, according to DraftKings, 97% of the bets placed in the Washington-Ohio State game is on Ohio State. So that makes me feel good about the Washington faded public because books just don't lose. They somehow always know more than the rest of us. So give me the Huskies at plus 8.5. I'm going for a win in this one.
I'm really
I
excited
feel
to
like
watch
this
the
either
matchup.
Washington win or get killed.
Yeah. I mean, you could tell me it's a 28-32 to 20 game or 32 to 25 game because Washington can score. Jedfish can score. And year 2 was when he started blowing up at Arizona. This is year 2 at Washington. There is an aspect of I'm really excited to see like Ephesians Pricesock and the other kid, Sicario Davis's matchup with Jeremiah Smith. How Washington defensively is going to be able to try to keep Jeremiah Smith in that offense at bay. But I like those picks. One more game breakdown before our 5 picks and our 4-legger. Number 4, LSU goes to number 13, Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 1.5-point favorite. Saturday, 3:30 Eastern on ABC. This is the game of the week. If you didn't tell me the first two games we talked about were the game of the week, mainly because this one's much more of like I have no idea what's going to happen kind of game.
Yeah. You have Trinidad going back for start number 3. Their offense has been electric with him, running the football, throwing the football. The offense looks pretty unstoppable. Then you have an LSU defense who is one of the best defenses in the country, and they look dominant. They stop the run, they stop the pass, they get to the quarterback, they force turnovers. It'll be interesting. Trinidad, he's been balling out, and he looks great. He's still pretty new to the scene, relatively new to the FBS, let alone SEC scene. For those of you not familiar, he came from Ferris State. He did win a national championship there. Did win the D2 Heisman there. Actually went to my high school, so shout out Trinidad for that. His dad was my bowling coach. There's a little bit of lore in my life for
Look at
all
that.
you guys. I feel like this is a fun. This is I should. I'll hit them up if they win this game. Something interesting. I'll tap into our baseball a little bit here. You know, when in baseball, when a new starting pitcher comes up and he's like first couple outings, he always looks like a superstar because nobody knows what he throws or what his tendencies are. But then once teams kind of figure it out, it goes downhill quickly for the kid. When does that happen for Trinidad, if ever? Do you think teams have no film on him and they don't know? At what point does that turn and it become more difficult for him? And is it this LSU game?
I can't lie and say I've been waiting for that too myself, because Austin Simmons, I was high on Austin Simmons coming into the year. I didn't think he was going to be Jackson Dart, but I was high on him. Trinidad, I didn't know anything about him. You knew him. But at the same time, I was just like, there has to be some sort of play here where you can tell it's starting to get fast on it. The speed of the game, even though he was very successful at the D2 level, the speed of the game in the SEC is starting to get a little fast. He's starting to get a little rushed. Hasn't happened yet. He's been very good. The Ole Miss offense has worked very well. And Lane Kiffin has shown once again that he can put together a really good offense. That in itself, I'm not sure if that'll be this game, because LSU is a really good defense. I don't even know if we have the numbers, but Ole Miss's pass game is 14th in the country and their run game is 25th. So they're very balanced and they're pretty effective at both.
Yeah, and he adds to both. He's been throwing the ball really well. He's an incredible runner. He's run for almost 200 yards now in his 2 starts that he's played. And on the flip side, you have an LSU offense who cannot run the football.
Can I ask you a question?
They are 111th. Yeah, go for it.
So you were on the show when when I was reacting to Brian Kelly's meltdown to the reporter after their win over Florida. To recap, Brian Kelly was asked first question after beating Florida, what's wrong with your offense? Why can't you run the ball? And you can make all the arguments in the world, and it makes sense that the reporter sometimes only gets one question, and that was his question. And unfortunately, he went first. But like, you can make all the arguments that like he should have worded it differently or whatever. Brian Kelly blew up on him, and rightfully so. Like, he was trying to defend his team after an emotional SEC win, a game that they got 5 interceptions in. They gutted out offensively. But I also think part of the reason that Brian Kelly blew up on him so much was he's worried about the run game. This is a team that last year couldn't run the ball and put Garrett Nussmeier in superhero save us moments too much, and it did bite them. And the thought process going into this year was you lose a couple of first round offensive linemen, but at the same time you're revamping that run game, you're revamping the O-line. You should have a run game behind Garrett Nussmeier. That's why he was so high up on Heisman ballots. I think Brian Kelly was freaked out on the reporter because he's actually worried about their run game not working.
I agree. I think that's exactly why he blew up. You don't blow up if you don't care. And I think there's truth in it. Like you said, they had 5 interceptions. Lag went through 5 picks, and you scored 20 points.
Right.
That's inexcusable. That's bad offense, even throwing the football, but especially running the football. The fact that you were given a short field, I think 4 of those were given short field, and they just couldn't capitalize on them. Ole Miss's rush defense is 120th in the country. LSU's rush offense is 111th. Caden Durham is pretty much the only LSU back that's really going to give them like work. And last year as a true freshman, he had over 1,000-yard season. He was great. Like you said, this year they lose some first round talent on the offensive line, lose other offensive linemen to the draft later on. Caden Durham's back, but they don't have any compliments for him. So you have a second year running back without much of a change. You don't have a change of pace guy. You don't have someone that can come in and kind of help him out, catch a breather. You probably lower on your offense. Your offense line's not quite as good as it was last year. Something's got to give in this game, though. Either Caden Durham and the LSU rush offense is going to be better than being 111th, or the Ole Miss rush defense has got to be better than being 120th. Something's got to give. This is a stoppable force versus a movable object. It'll be interesting to see which one stands their ground, and moves forward. I think we both assume that the LSU pass offense is going to put up points in this game. Ole Miss's defense has looked iffy so far this year. It's Garrett Nussmeier. It's LSU. They're going to be able to throw the football. It might start off slow, but it's still going to end well. It just always seems to on a box score at least. That'll be interesting to see how that part unfolds, though. Someone's like, that will probably make or break the game, right? Is Ole Miss's defense really this bad, or is LSU's rush offense really this bad? That's probably the big question that we'll look at this game, and Caden Durham has 150 yards and they win. They keep Trinidad on the sideline. Okay. I don't think you're going to turn over Trinidad 5 times like you did Florida, so I don't think you can bank on that either.
No, look, if they turn Trinidad over a couple times, it might be enough to win the game, just because LSU is an excellent team. My question in general about them is, are they number 4 deserving elite? Because you could argue that because Clemson was ranked in the top 4 to start the year, that LSU's win over them already vaulted them up. Clemson hasn't looked great. Clemson's 1-3.
Terrible.
So how quality of a win was that? And then Florida's getting ready to fire their coach. They're 1-3, 1-4. Also, Florida, like you said, LSU turned them over 5 times. They got 5 interceptions on DJ Lagway, and they only could turn that into 20 points. So all of that said is, I don't know how good LSU is. I think they're really good. They have a really good quarterback, but their run game hasn't shown up. With that said, I think Lane Kiffin's going to put up points, and maybe to a degree where LSU once again won't be running the ball because they're going to have to try to go pound for pound, pass for pass, try to catch up, try to stay in the game. It could be a very low scoring game if LSU's defense does stop Trinidad and Ole Miss, but it could also, in my eyes, like as Lane Kiffin tried to tell us about, this is a completely different discussion, commenting under the post of his daughter dating an LSU player. As Lane Kiffin tried to tell us, take the over. It might be a high scoring game. I just trust Ole Miss's offense probably to get into the end zone more than I trust LSU's offense. But it really comes down, for me, the biggest key is how good is that LSU defense, because I don't trust LSU's offense to score 30.
I agree. I think I'll be honest. I think LSU's a fraudulent number 4 team in the country. They're there because they beat Clemson and Florida. They have the big names. LSU's a big name. They're an SEC school. Clemson has looked awful, and their offense their offense stunk against Troy. Their offense stunk against Georgia Tech. Maybe Troy and Georgia Tech just have elite defenses. I don't think that's the case. I don't think LSU's defense might be as good as they thought it was, because it turns out Clemson's offense really isn't all that. Same thing with Florida. Florida's offense stunk against Miami. It stunk against USF. It really stunk against Florida, or against LSU. And you got 5 turnovers. You're not going to get that maybe ever again this season. If you go back and look at the interceptions, it wasn't like LSU was making crazy plays defensively. They made the play, which is big. DJ Lagway was made awful reads, and they were bad throws. There was a combination of those two things. A lot of them were presents. He should have just wrapped them up and went over the sideline and handed it to Brian Kelly himself. I don't think LSU's defense is quite the level that it appears on paper, it appears in the rankings, because of the lucky vaunting they've gotten from the good teams they've played actually just being bad. And I think that bodes well for Ole Miss. I think that plays into Ole Miss. And I think Ole Miss will be the first actually good offense LSU has seen. And sometimes that can shake you up a little bit. And I don't know if the LSU offense has enough juice to make, like you said, if Ole Miss gets up big. I don't know if LSU has what it takes to crawl back into it.
I I'm right there in agreement with you. I haven't looked at the Ole Miss schedule yet, but in the SEC, this is not a must-win game for LSU because they have chance to catch up down the road. But I mean, in general, like they got South Carolina next week, who's looked very up and down, mostly down. They have Vanderbilt, they have Texas A&M, they have Alabama, Arkansas. For what it's worth, put up a lot of points on Ole Miss. They have a really good offense. They got Arkansas and they got Oklahoma, and hopefully by then John Mateer is back. But I say that to say I'm not sure if 9-3 in this conference is going to get you to the SEC title game or to the playoff. It might, because everyone has a really tough schedule, and there's going to be a good amount of 3-loss teams. When you're thinking about Bama, this could be their second loss. When you're thinking about if Georgia takes this loss, they have a tough schedule going forward. There could be other 3-loss teams that are vying for that, but this is a game that LSU needs to win and win handedly if they want any shot at the playoff. And by the way, one of the reasons, and sorry to ramble, one of the reasons Brian Kelly was so angry after that press conference was he knows what job he has. He knows he has the LSU job, and he knows the last 3 or 4 coaches, I forget the number, who had that job by year 4 won a national title. So he knows the expectation at LSU this year is to win the national title. And by the fan base, by the reporters, by his administration, by his bosses, everyone involved. And he hasn't done it yet. His teams have looked incomplete. So this isn't a must win, but it's a you need to win kind of game.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, I know we're at a long podcast here. We got to move forward. Last thing I'll say, Ole Miss has a pretty favorable SEC schedule. They're already 2-0, which is important to note. If they come out with this home win against LSU, move to 3-0, their remaining games are at Georgia, very difficult. But with the schedule, you could lose that. Then they get at Oklahoma, which that could be a John Mateerless Oklahoma team, which is going to be massive. Or it lines up if he was back, that would be like game 1 back, and that's always, you never know. But then you get South Carolina at home, Florida at home. You end the year in the Egg Bowl at Mississippi State. A much better Mississippi State, but a team that Ole Miss certainly has handled the last few years and should again. Ole Miss, you win this game, you really just have to go 1-1 in those at Georgia, at Oklahoma game, and you've set yourself up to be a 1-loss SEC team with a great shot at an SEC championship appearance, and at the very least, a college football playoff appearance.
Right. That I think you and I are saying very similar things. Of LSU's got to win this game more than Ole Miss does, but we're a little wary on that. Speaking of need to win some games, we already talked about John Mateer a little bit. Let's go into our week 4 picks or week 5 picks. Let's talk about, finally, after our 40-minute breakdown of it, number 6 Oregon, number 3 Penn State. We're picking against the spread. Penn State's a 3.5-point favorite. Saturday, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. Jace, who you got in that game?
I'm going to roll with the Duckies. I 3.5 is actually a scary line. If that thing was 2.5, I think I would probably go Penn State, but I see a world where Penn State wins this by a field goal or Oregon wins it, so I like the Ducks in this.
This isn't even any bias. This is that hook at the half.
Yeah, it's the hook.
That, to me, that allows Penn State to win 31-28, and we would still win the pick. Regardless, I still think, like you said, like I said plenty of times this week to each other, I feel pretty calm about this game, and I just want to stay quiet so I don't jinx anything. Second game, Alabama, Georgia. Georgia's a 3-point favorite, also at the same time, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. Who you got?
Very realistic chance this game's a push and we both just tie it, but I'm going Georgia here.
Right. I think Georgia's the smart call, smart play. Georgia is at home. They haven't lost in that stadium since before COVID, and they're both excellent teams. I do wonder how much of the Kalen DeBoer versus a Dan Lanning / Kirby Smart defense theory is active. And I think if Alabama shows up ready to, like, with their motor and ready to go, Alabama's going to win the game. They were also my SEC champion pick, so I got to ride with them. I'm picking Alabama. Let's go for the last game we broke down, but then we have more games to break down. Number 4 LSU, number 13 Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 1.5-point favorite. Go for it.
I'm going to ride with Ole Miss in this one. I feel pretty comfortable with this pick as well.
right there with you. I think Lane Kiffin's going to put up points. Brian Kelly's going to try. There might be some issues. Who knows? All right, 2 games we haven't broken down, but we're going to add it to our picks. So if you have thoughts and takes, feel free. Auburn is going to College Station to play number 9, Texas A&M. A&M is a 6.5-point favorite. Pretty big line. Saturday, 3:30 Eastern on ESPN.
I'm rolling with Texas A&M. I think Marcel Reed's a dog. I think Mike Elko beating Notre Dame kind of proved this Texas A&M. This is a different version of Texas A&M than what we're used to. Also, I just don't think Auburn. I don't think Jackson Arnold is quite there yet to go into an atmosphere like the 110 they're going to see at Kyle Field and hang with Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M runs away with this one. Could be a close one till the fourth quarter and then runs away with it, kind of thing.
Auburn was a 6.5-point dog last week against Oklahoma, and I would argue both of these teams aren't similar in terms of their strengths, but they're just as good, probably. Texas A&M, they might have the best offense in the country. Colin Klein, their offensive coordinator, if they continue this up, he's going to be a top candidate for a lot of head coaching jobs that open up at the end of the season. I'm riding with A&M, Marcel Reed, Colin Klein. That team is looking dangerous offensively. And then your game, number 1, Ohio State. They're 8.5-point favorites going to Washington Saturday, 3:30 Eastern on CBS. What we got here?
I am rolling with the Huskies. That's my shot in the bark. I'm sticking with them here. It's like I could be annoying and go Ohio State. No, I'll stick with the Huskies. Stay consistent.
I'm surprised you're allowed to take the Huskies in anything as with our allegiances, but I'll allow it. That I'm going to take Ohio State. I think there's a conversation that Ohio State's going to come in with a conservative game plan to protect Julian Sayin. I just think if you come in with a conservative game plan, Washington can score, and you don't have the exact same defense as you had last year. Your Ohio State, I think, is going to win pretty handedly, maybe 2 scores. I'm going to take Ohio State. So we differed on 2 of our 5 picks, which makes me feel good about keeping my lead for next week. But we'll see how the rest of the season goes. Before we get to our 4-leg parlay, I want to touch on a piece of controversy Jason and I found out about this week. We can't make any comments about Heisman picks ever again because we chose Cade Klubnik to start the year, and Clemson's now 1-3. And then I think last week I said something about John Mateer dusting off his Heisman trophy on Twitter, and John Mateer is now out 3 to 4 weeks with a hand after undergoing surgery to repair a bone in his hand. So I'm not going to be making any more Heisman picks for the year. Why don't you break down our 4-legger flag, our F4D 4-legger?
All right, the flag for discussion 4-legger. As always, $5 bet. This one's to win $83.25. It's plus 1565. It's a little bit boosted. DraftKings had a boost, so we took the 25% one there. We're not sponsored, so we have no promo code, but have fun with us if you'd like. If you've got the funds to throw around and it's not gonna get you in trouble, join us along on the journey. Game number 1, we're taking Indiana. We teased them to -6.5. Iowa. Indiana looks like the real deal. I think we're both kind of bought in that Indiana is the real deal now. I think we both think Iowa's going to try to ugly muck this game up, and they might be able to for a quarter, 2.5. We both think Indiana's just too good for that to come to fruition, and we think they're going to run away with that one. Leg number 2 is Notre Dame -4.5 at Arkansas. Farbode had a great catch here. Farbode was looking at it earlier in the week, and I think Notre Dame was 12.5 at the time. And then people start hammering Arkansas. Taylor Green's awesome, I get it. But that brought it all the way down to 4.5. Notre Dame is too good of a football team to against a 2-2 Arkansas to not give us 4.5 points. So we had to take it. This one's a little bit of a plus money pick for the 3rd leg, but we went TCU is a 3-point dog at Arizona State on Friday night. So tune in Friday night. A TCU money line is what we're going to roll with. TCU is my Big 12 champion. Josh Hoover, I've been hyping him up all off season. If you were with us since day one, he's looking like the real deal. He's like 6th in Heisman odds now. Just saying, people. Josh Hoover's been balling out, and we both really like the spot that TCU's in. ASU, great team. So I think that's what gives us the most pause. Kenny Dillingham's a great coach. We're really rooting for him and ASU, but we like the Horned Frogs there. And the last one, like an Ole Miss money line. I think we both feel pretty good about Ole Miss at home against LSU. I think we both think LSU is a little underrated. We like the spot Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss is in. We think their defense is going to improve. We're taking the Rebels to run away with that game. So Indiana -6.5, Notre Dame -4.5, TCU money line, Ole Miss money line, $5 to win $83 essentially. You heard it here first. If you've got the funds, you've got the ability to do so, come join us.
Yeah, it's we're playing with house money now because we've already had one of these hit, but it's a fun thing to track every week. Honestly, leg wise, we're like 11 of 16 on legs, so overall our picks haven't been bad. It's been a couple picks here and there every week that's like, oh man, like how I wish that could have hit. The worst pick we had was Cal -12.5 against SCSU in a game in which Cal didn't score a point. But I don't know what's worse, that pick or our Clemson pick to win the national title. But you know what? Probably. You know what, though? We never said we're going to be right about everything. We just said we're going to talk you through our thought processes. Well, Jace, there's a massive weekend. We've talked about a bunch of the big games. Is there anything else you want to discuss, cover, talk about, or have we covered everything?
I think there's one last thing to cover, and that's follow us on TikTok at flag4 discussion, on Twitter /X F4 discussion, YouTube flag for discussion spelled out, and then anywhere you get your podcast also spelled out flag for discussion. That's the last thing. If you want to have the best college football weekend experience, start with flag for discussion, get yourself right, and then get into the games. You'll feel so much better. You'll be locked in.
Man, I don't think I could have done that any better. You just shot a promo for our show. I think I might cut that up and post it somewhere. Well, yeah, what Jay said. If you want a great college football weekend, make us part of it and then go right into the games. We try to set you up the best we can for the biggest games of the week. As we say all the time, we're fans. We're treating this as fans. We don't have inside info like journalists or beat writers. We don't have a lot of sources. We are treating it the same way you all do at home. Is we're on Twitter a lot. We're on the message boards. We are taking as much information as we can, but we have a lot of fun just talking college football. On that note, Jace already did our socials. It's great to have you back, Jace. It's great to have this back as a two-person show for the foreseeable future. Enjoy week 5, everybody. This has been so much fun. From myself, Farbod Merkazi, and my lovely partner, Jace Hatfield. This has been Flag for Discussion. Thanks for tuning in, folks.